Soul Simmers, welcome to the Builders Bootcamp, your ultimate training ground for learning how to build in The Sims. Whether you're a beginner or someone who's looking to level up their skills, this series will take you from the beginner tips to the pro level builds. This is the 2025 updated edition of the series that I did in 2022, since we've had quite a couple of build updates in The Sims, and it will cover everything that you need to know to create your dream builds in the game. So grab your blueprints and let's get to building. In episode 11 of the Builders Bootcamp, we are going to dive into interior decoration. I'm going to show you guys some really nice tips and tricks on how you can make your builds feel alive, how you can make your builds feel like there are Sims really living there and having lived a long time there, how you can get creative with your clutter, and just in general some tips and tricks on how you can make sure that your houses are nice for playability as well. So let's actually hop into game so I can give you some guidance. We are back with my wonderful test home that we've been using over time. I didn't make a floor plan simply so that we can just work without the distraction of having any walls, but just so you know, the previous episode was all about floor plans, and if you're curious to learn more, feel free to go check it out, or the entire playlist for the Builders Bootcamp. When we start with interior design, I would like to reiterate a tip that I already gave in the previous episode, and that is that you can kind of see your building, especially if you're building for playability, as a little bowl. That means that you want to have the higher items, like maybe a shower top combo, on the outside of your build. Let me quickly show you. Let's say that you put this over here, and that you maybe want your smaller items, like maybe just a bathtub, just a random example, in the middle of your build. Obviously, it wouldn't make a lot of sense to have a bathtub in the middle of your build and a bathtub combo at the edges, but basically what I'm telling you is that when you're making a floor plan, but also when you're decorating rooms, that it sometimes helps to put items on the edge. This is specifically useful when, let's say you have a bedroom. Let's say that this is a big bedroom, and you want to place a bed in here. Something that you can always think about is if you want to have a bed, but you also want to have a wardrobe, and let's say you're going to use one of the taller wardrobes. Sometimes placing the taller wardrobe in the middle of your build is going to be slightly annoying. The main reason for it being that if you're playing in this build and you have a lot of tall objects that are placed in different places in the middle of your build, it's going to obstruct your view when you're playing. So what I would suggest is maybe moving that wardrobe to the side so that your wardrobe is against an outer wall. You could, even if you wanted to, kind of change this around and even have the bed in the middle. However, I personally would say if you have the opportunity without creating a really weird shape in the build, placing things against the outer wall and kind of using the inner circle of the build for traffic space and having your Sims move around in it is going to help hugely in playability. Obviously, then you are prioritizing your interior decoration with playability. That doesn't always look the best, so it is up to you to find a balance between the two. Then another tip that I also gave in the floor plan episode, but which I feel like is still relevant here, is that if you're trying to figure out the sizing of your build, having filler furniture is going to help a lot. So if you're trying to decide what amount of kitchen space you need, just feel free to place some counters. It is always good to have a counter for cooking, maybe a counter for decoration. You're going to skip a tile for a stove, then you have another counter for maybe decoration, a counter for a sink, and then maybe you're going to have a fridge. By placing this first and just getting some filler furniture, this doesn't have to be the pretty furniture that you eventually want to use, you're going to be able to figure out if this layout works. Something that I immediately notice here is that either the sink is going to go all the way into the corner, it's going to go right next to the stove, or it's going to go next to the fridge. Either way, something that I don't like, because I don't think it looks good if a sink is next to something else. I always prefer to have a sink with like a standalone tile next to it, which means that what I would do here is I would create a corner kitchen, which then we can have this one over here. We would still have the same amount of cabinets, and then we can even move the fridge over here, maybe have a plant or something in the corner. If you want, if you have the money, you could even have some more space. You could figure out if you want the kitchen island here. I feel like by placing filler furniture without worrying too much about the look and feel, you can start to estimate scale and you can start to realize that this is actually a perfectly fine shape for a kitchen. If you actually wall it off, that means that it might become harder to actually have an island here because then your Sims can no longer sit here. So maybe what you can do is you can partially open it up, and that way your kitchen is going to feel like slightly closed, slightly open. It's going to be an open floor plan. Stuff like this is going to help you a lot in determining where you want to place items before before you start worrying too much about your color scheme. Then once you know a little bit of the layout and you know if the size of your build is right to make things look cozy, because I think this is the biggest mistake that people make in building, but also in decorating, is that they make their spaces so big that no matter how well you decorate, it's just gonna feel empty. And also, if you're gonna move all of your furniture to the sides of your build and have everything on the outer walls, it's also going to feel weird and empty. So again, it's kind of up to you to envision that bowl shape and make sure that your taller furniture is towards the outside, but you have maybe lower furniture like a sofa and stuff in the middle, and that the scale of your build is actually making sense. So it feels like it actually makes sense in terms of your furniture placement. Something that you can also notice with trying to do furniture placement is that you will notice if your scale not only is right in terms of the sizing of your room, but also if the scale of the objects that you're using is right. So let's say that I place these two sofas. I immediately feel like they look small. The sofas look too tiny in this room, and that's because it's a two-seater. So that means that in this house, we can probably do with 2 3-seaters if we wanted to. We have the space for it. That immediately makes those sofas feel way more proportionate. I also think that in this house, we would definitely have place for a nice big fireplace. And then we can start to play around with like the placements of the sofa and figuring out if we like how that works. As you can see, yet again, I'm really not focusing on the look and feel of things. I'm just placing items to get a lay of the land and figure out if my layout of the house makes sense and if the furniture that I'm picking makes sense for the storyline, makes sense for the Sims that I'm building for. And all of this is prior to even picking a style or a color scheme. Once you actually do have a bit of an idea of how you would like to furnish your build, I think it is time to start picking a color scheme. And I prefer to start with flooring. Flooring dictates what your build is going to look like so incredibly much. I would even argue that flooring is even more important than wallpaper, because I don't know about you, but most people have relatively consistent flooring in their house. However, wallpapers you can change from room to room. This means that even if you go for 2 floorings or maybe even 3, you're going for a tile, a nice wood for the general living space, and then carpet for the bedrooms, you're gonna have to pick something that matches together, that works together, and that is gonna feel like it matches the entire overall style of the house. You can imagine that if you go for a dark wood floor like this, it's definitely gonna determine what the rest of your house is gonna look like. Whereas if you go for a very light wood floor, or maybe you even wanna go for carpet in the entire house, that immediately brightens up the house a lot. So my suggestions, once you have like a lay of the furniture, start with picking your floor and decide what kind of floor you want with the style of furniture you're going to go for. This is a relatively traditional house, meaning that you can go a lot of ways with it. You could go very modern on the inside, you can go a bit more traditional, you can go more like thrifted or secondhand, you can go a bit more classy or luxe. Everything would work because this is a relatively standard house. However, if you're building a very stylized house, let's say that you're building a very hyper modern mansion, maybe it's actually nice to match your furniture to that, and your flooring is going to play a huge part in deciding the color scheme. Once you have that, I would suggest that you can either move on with the furniture and then pick the walls per room, or if you like, you can also immediately pick the wallpaper for each room, already kind of going a direction with the character for that room. Once you have either figured out, meaning the style of your furniture or the wallpaper or both, it is time to actually start furnishing. Something that is good to know with furnishing is that the camera that you're using is going to make a difference. If you're on the Sims 4 camera and you grab an object, by default, it snaps to the grid. If you hold Alt on your keyboard, you will see that you can free place things. It no longer snaps the grid. If you enable the cheat bb.moveObjects space on, this will also be covered in the cheats episode, you are actually able to intersect objects. Basically what the game will do is it will ignore the safe zone around an item and you can just place it wherever you want. You can even place it in a wall. It is then up to you to make sure that you don't place items in a way that your Sims no longer will be able to use it. If you are a little bit wary of that and you don't think that you have that under control just yet, feel free to not use this cheat, because then the game, let me show you, the game won't even allow you to place objects in a way that your Sims won't be able to access them. So your game will literally tell you can't intersect other objects, it will turn red, and then you can only place it in places where you'll actually be able to use it, meaning that if you want to have the sofas this close together, the game is saying that that doesn't work, even though I, after building a lot of hours in The Sims, know that you can technically place sofas like this and they will still be functional. I think the BB Move Objects on cheat is one of the most used cheats in the game, so I would suggest familiarizing yourself with it, because a lot of builds are also built with BB BB Move objects on, meaning that if you download them from the gallery, there is a chance that the game will delete objects if you don't have that cheat turned on. Now, I mentioned that the camera has an influence on this, but I haven't explained what. As you can see, if you have an object and you click and you hold, nothing happens. You can't really rotate it. It's just like this. If you want to rotate it, you're going to have to use your period and your comma key, and it only rotates on an angle. This is a preset angle made by The Sims, meaning that you could go for this or this or this angle, but something in between doesn't exist. You can, however, rotate on a custom angle, but you're gonna have to use the Sims 3 camera for this. As soon as you're on the Sims 3 camera, you will notice that you can actually click and then drag with your mouse to rotate, which wasn't possible before. Before you could only do it with your period and comma key. And now that you can rotate it like this, you can hold Alt on your keyboard, the same key that you use to free place it and get it closer and like off the grid. You can hold Alt, and now you can actually place objects like this. You can free rotate, meaning that you could slightly tilt the sofa, creating this sort of more lived-in, cozier look. So again, this only works on the Sims 3 camera, and you're gonna have to use Alt. You click on an item, you hold your mouse button, so don't let it go. Hold Alt, and then you can freely rotate. With the freely rotation, you'll notice that if you do that without BB Move objects on, your game is going to struggle earlier with actually free placing items. So I would say if you're into the free rotation and you want to try that out, do it with BB Move objects on, because it's just going to prevent your game from constantly telling you that you're not allowed to place an object that way. If you ever want to reset the rotation, you don't have to click on it and then like try to get it right. What you can just do is grab the item, press the comma or the period key on your keyboard, and it will basically go back to that default rotation with that set angle that The Sims has programmed into the game, basically. Another really nice tip, if you don't want to do the free rotation, but you still want to get a little bit more freedom in placing, I'm quickly going to turn on the grid so that you can properly see this. If you now move an item, it will always move with half of the tile. So you can move an item half of the tile, backwards, forwards, etc. If you press F5 on your keyboard, it will allow you to move something with a quarter of a tile. I don't know if you see the difference, but before it could go from here to here, and now there's a step in between. So if you press F5 again, this will turn off again and it's half a tile. But if you want to get a little bit more exact with your placement without using BB Move objects and without using the free rotation, you can press F5 and it will allow you to move quarter tiles. Now that you know the basics of placing an object and the freedom that you have in that, I think another really neat trick that you might want to know is how to lower and raise objects and how to make things bigger and smaller, because there are 2 keyboard shortcuts for that as well. If you grab a sofa and you press 9 on your keyboard, you will raise it up in the air. As you can see, it's now no longer on the floor. And if you press 0, it will go down again. So with this, you can create custom placement. Of course, if you place a sofa like this floating on the wall, your Sims are not going to be able to sit on it. Your Sims will tell you that they won't be able to use this item. If you have BB Move objects off, you cannot lower and raise items. I'm pressing 9 and 0 on my keyboard now. I just turned off the cheat. Just so you know, you're gonna have to use that cheat if you want to lower and raise objects. I personally would say if you're into building in The Sims and you enjoy it, again, familiarize yourself with this cheat and just always have it on, because there are so many things that you're gonna want to do to customize your build and make it cozy that you can't do if you don't have BB Move objects on. And it's one of those cheats that if you get used to it, you'll get a good feeling and intuition for how you can place objects so that they are still functional. I turned the cheat back on because for the next one, I also actually need the cheat to be on. So now that you know that you can lower and you can raise objects, you can also size them up and size them down. If you click an item and you use the square bracket keys on your keyboard, so they are basically a little bit to a row below and then a little bit to the right of your 9 and 0 key, you can actually size things up and size things down with the square bracket. As you can see, you can make items really big and you can make items relatively small. I would say that for functional items like a sofa, maybe making them bigger or smaller is not necessarily the most useful. However, if you're using things like a rug, let me just grab a nice rug, this one, and you want to have it bigger so it fills more of the space, you can press that bracket and bam, there you have a rug. Some rugs size up and down really nicely. Some of them, like this one, go from pretty average to really big, but you could size it down one and then it becomes a little bit smaller, maybe creating like a little play nook for the kids. So now that you know that you can raise items, lower items, make them bigger and smaller, and how to get a general feeling of how to lay out your furniture, I think it is time for some decoration tips. I think the one thing that makes builds feel alive is clutter. So don't be afraid to take your time to clutter. I know that the game sometimes feels overwhelming, especially if you have a lot of the packs when it comes to the clutter category, because let's be real, it's not the most well-organized category at this point, but try to think of items that you would expect in a certain room. In the kitchen, having like a dish rack and maybe a towel and maybe a bread box, just scrolling through and just grabbing some of the things. Maybe someone was making some bread or some cakes and they left some stuff out, maybe having a fruit bowl. All of these things simply help a lot when it comes down to making something look cozy. As you can see, however, sometimes the placement of these things is a bit weird. Like, why can this not go all the way into the corner? This is where that free placement trick comes in super handy. What I would suggest that you do, if you want to clutter a bit more precise, you're gonna definitely need BB Move objects for this, is once you've placed it, I would always suggest first place it on the height that you want to have it on. So let it snap to the kitchen cabinet or the shelf or the desk or the table. Then what you're going to do is you're going to grab that item and you're going to move it out of the way. You're going to take those objects with you. Then you're going to grab that object and take it off. As you can see, it will snap to other counters. So if the other counters are in the way, don't be afraid to also quickly move them out of the way. Get that item that you want to free place. Make sure that it's rotated or set the way that you want it. As you can see, it is just on the right height because I grabbed it from here. And then you're going to hold Alt. And while you hold Alt, you can free place it and scoot it further back into the corner. From here, you can actually move this back and bam, now it is placed better in the corner. Once you understand the free placing and the lowering and raising objects, from here, decorating just becomes fun. You get to experiment with it, you get to see how you want to place things and how clutter works. And I think this is the part where, for me personally, building really comes to life. It's the part where you've struggled with the shell, you've struggled with the floor plan, but you figure out what kind of family you want to have living in this house, and then you get to customize it. And that just brings the build to life. Then next up, I would like to show you guys how you can use items that don't slot to anything, but you can still use them as decoration. Let's say you want to use this beautiful plant from Horse Ranch. You can actually size it down so that it fits a bit more in scale, maybe even one more. So like this, so that it looks a bit more like it should go onto a counter. And then you're going to use your 9 or 0 keys to raise it up. As soon as you see the green square, you know that you've hit the right height, so don't go anything above. As soon as you don't see it, then you see it, you're at the right height. Then you're going to use Alt so that you can free place it, and then you can just kind of estimate where you want to have it. If you want to make sure that it's not floating, you can use your camera to rotate like this. I'm currently on the Sims 4 camera. I have a mod, which I will tell you guys about in the last episode, but otherwise you're going to have to do this on the Sims 3 camera and use your scroll wheel. Make sure to watch the episode about camera movement if you don't know how to do this, but just know, in case you're seeing this and you're like, hey, she's on the Sims 4 camera and she is doing custom angles, I have a mod to enable that. I just wanted to tell you guys. But this is really nice if you want to slot things that normally don't actually slot to it. You know, maybe plants that are supposed to be on the floor. Let's say that you size this down and you want to have it actually up here. You can do that by just using that sizing up and down and raising and lowering. Then I have 2 more scenarios where you might want to decorate with something and that it doesn't necessarily work. So let's say that you have this wardrobe or this cabinet and you would really like to have a plant on top. Let's say you have this plant which has like a little overhang, but for this one it only snaps in the middle, which obviously is not really what you want. If you want to place it more to the side and you want to get more creative with your placement, there's a couple of steps that you're going to have to take. First and foremost, when you want to freely decorate an item that has slots at the top, make sure that everything is filled. You can check that by just grabbing an item, and if it doesn't snap to it anymore, that means that all of the slots on that item are filled. So let's say for this one, actually, you're going to notice that, okay, there we go. Just 2 items, that was it. Sometimes smaller items will still snap to it, but it seems like this one is done right now. Then, as soon as you've filled all the slots that items can actually snap to, what you're going to do is you're going to grab the item that you want and you're going to try to raise it to the right height. I think this is a really nice example of an item that will end up floating. Don't ask me why this happens in The Sims, but as you can see, this planter pot is floating. That's not what we want. But if we lower it, it will actually be clipping. That's also not what we want. This is where this magical item is gonna come in super handy. This is the shelf from Dream Home Decorator. Unfortunately, the shelf comes with that pack and it is exclusive to that pack, but it is the one that is the most functional for it. You can always try it with other shelves though. It's not exclusive to this shelf. I've just seen everyone use this one because it's basically the best one for it, because most items will snap to it. But if you have this one, what you can do is you can basically snap the plant that you want to place, and then you're gonna grab this item as a whole and you're gonna place it at the exact right height. You're gonna make sure that that matches, and then from here, I like to do this from top view because then it doesn't accidentally start snapping to that again. You can grab this, you can maybe rotate it the way that you want, and then you can hold Alt and you can free place it and you can put it on the side of this cabinet. Now you can see that it's sitting on the corner, it's overhanging nicely, and it is no longer floating, it is at the right height. So the steps for this again, make sure that all the pre-existing slots are filled. Make sure that you have the Dream Home Decorator shelf and that by holding Alt, you also can free place things on the wall, that you get it to the exact right height that you want it to. You can either do that beforehand or already with the object on it. You can place things inside or at the top. I like to do at the top because then you can actually see if it's at the right height a bit more easily. And then from there, you can just move it anywhere on here. It doesn't snap to anything because the pre-existing slots are filled. And then you will notice that it won't be floating and it's actually really easy to place. In the case of this cabinet, this plant actually does snap to the right height immediately, so you can just freely place it. But some other objects might not snap to it at all, like the vase that I showed you earlier. And then it might be one of those situations where, again, you're gonna have to use the Dream Home Decorator shelf to basically align it to the right position, drag it off, make sure that all the other slots are filled. So now if we wanted to decorate more freely, let's say we wanted to add another plant, as you can see, this one still snaps to it. So if you want to add these freely, you can see that this item, there's a lot more slots. Okay, now it's no longer snapping to it, which is good. That means that we can freely place it. We're gonna get that plant, and now we can just freely put it somewhere where we want. Let's say that we want it all the way in the corner. And let's say that was the only thing, then we're gonna actually delete all the other things we placed to fill the slots, and bam, you have a cute plant. From here, keep in mind that you can't move it because it will immediately snap again unless you fill the slots with items. Now that you know all of those decoration and clutter tips and tricks, I think there's one final thing that's gonna make a huge difference when it comes to light, when it comes to making your build look cozy, and that is lighting. If you want to change the lighting in the game, obviously the most easy and straightforward way is going to go into the lighting category and just picking a different light. You'll notice that some lights, like this one, have very cool light, and then you'll notice that some other lights, let me find my favorite ceiling light, and you'll notice that some other lights will have like warmer light, basically. It's gonna be a warmer yellow. It is up to you to what you prefer. I think in the end, everything could work. If you're going for a bit more of a cool tone build, you can always go for the more cool toned light. If you want to go for a bit of a warmer tone build, you can obviously go for the warmer toned light. Something that is good to know is that if you're in live mode, you can actually change the color and the intensity of the light as well. For some reason, it's not working in my game right now. I think I might have a conflicting mod, so I'm gonna have to do some research and look into that. However, if you're in live mode, so if you go up here and you actually go into your active household, you can click on a light and then you can change the color and intensity, which is good to know because if you're trying to set a specific mood for that house and you want, let's say, an RGB gamer room, you can actually change the colors of the light. Some lights will come with a different color by default. Let's say you have the salt lamp, that will be super orange. And then we also have, let me see, this light will be very green. Then let's see, we have this one, which is red. We have the pink lava lamp, we have the purple lava lamp, we have the blue one. Just so you know, all of these color lights, you can also pick if you click on a light and then you can check the color and intensity, so you can basically dim it or make it brighter, or you can change the color of the lights. Obviously, changing the color of the lights is going to make a big difference in how your build looks, and if you're trying to set a specific scene, this is something that should not be overlooked. I think lighting in a build is going to make a huge difference in terms of how cozy it looks or not, and something that I have recently been challenging myself to do is not using any ceiling lights in the main spaces. So I use a ceiling light maybe in the kitchen, I use a ceiling light maybe in the bathroom, but basically any room IRL where you also don't want to have a ceiling light turned on, I'm trying to just make cozy with more accent style lighting. This means that sometimes I add wall lights next to the TV, or I'll get like a nice big standing lamp right next to the sofas, but it is one of those things where I think this can really change the way that your build looks and feels, and it can make it instantly so much more cozy. When you're working on lighting, don't forget to also add the lighting on the outside of your build. There's a specific category for outdoor lights. Make sure that you light up your build if you want to to check if it's well lit at night, just change the time either here or with the L button on your keyboard, and make sure that things like your garden and stuff are also well lit. This is again gonna make your build feel like so much more alive, so much more realistic, because it really feels like people are living in this build and it's just not like this sort of dark and gloomy space. At night, you can also see the colored lights even more, and you can see what kind of effect you can get with that. I think that covers all my tips and tricks on interior decorating. Again, a lot of interior decoration, just like with the floor plan, is going to be trial and error and you figuring out your style and what you like. Don't shy away from trying again. Don't shy away from removing things that you've placed before and just starting over again. Familiarize yourself with the build buy catalog in The Sims, and that takes time, especially if you have a lot of packs. If you want a little bit of direction with this, just as with anything, Pinterest and Google and YouTube videos and other people's speed builds are your best friend. Watching other people create in this game, or just taking inspiration from real life pictures, is going to help so much in figuring out your style, in getting better with interior decoration in general. Just like it would with real life, it does really help to watch those things for The Sims as well. If you're interested in the next episode, which is all going to be about building cheats, and I have a couple of interesting ones on the list, please make sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss the next episode. And if you like this episode and you learned something new, please feel free to toss it a cheeky like and leave a comment for extra engagement. And with all of that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye, everyone!